The fluorescent lights of the Texaco station cast harsh shadows across the empty asphalt at 2:47 a.m. on July 12, 1983. Gerald Hoffman had been working the graveyard shift for 3 years, long enough to recognize the rhythm of Seattle's sleepless hours, truckers heading south on I-5, insomniacs buying cigarettes, the occasional drunk needing gas money. But the blue sedan that pulled up to Pump 4 was different. The driver emerged slowly, scanning the lot before approaching the self-service island. Mid-40s, average build, wearing a windbreaker despite the summer heat. He pumped exactly $8 worth of regular unleaded, paid with crumpled bills, and drove away without making eye contact. Gerald wouldn't have thought twice about it, except for the license plate, Washington State. But the registration sticker looked wrong. Too clean, too new. 2 nights later, the same car returned at 2:51 a.m. Same routine, same nervous energy from the driver. This time, Gerald noticed a second vehicle idling near the air pump station, a brown Buick with 2 occupants who never got out. When the blue sedan finished refueling, both cars left in opposite directions. Gerald had learned to trust his instincts during his 4 years in the Navy. Something about these midnight visitors triggered the same unease he'd felt patrolling the Mediterranean during the Iranian hostage crisis. The careful movements, the deliberate timing, the way they avoided the well-lit areas near the station's windows, these weren't random customers. By the 4th sighting on July 18th, Gerald had started keeping a notebook in the cash register drawer. License plates, timestamps, physical descriptions, anything that seemed relevant. The blue sedan's driver was joined by 2 others that night. A woman in a dark coat who spoke to him briefly before returning to a waiting Toyota, and an older man who exchanged what appeared to be an envelope for a small package. The transactions lasted less than 2 minutes. No words Gerald could hear through the bulletproof glass, just quick handshakes and careful glances toward the street. But their body language suggested familiarity, routine. This wasn't a chance encounter or a drug deal. It felt organized, purposeful. Gerald's military training had taught him to observe and document, but his civilian life had made him cautious about getting involved in other people's business. Seattle in 1983 was experiencing a surge in organized crime, and the last thing he needed was trouble with dangerous people. His ex-wife already questioned his decision to work nights at a gas station instead of using his engineering degree. Getting mixed up in something criminal would only validate her concerns about his judgment. Still, the notebook grew thicker each week. More license plates, more faces, more patterns emerging from what initially seemed like random late-night activity. Gerald began timing his inventory checks to coincide with the visitors' arrivals, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. He had no idea he was documenting one of the most successful Soviet intelligence operations on American soil. The breakthrough came on August 3rd when Gerald recognized one of the license plates from a news report. A hit-and-run accident on Capitol Hill had left a pedestrian in critical condition, and police were seeking the driver of a brown Buick with the exact plate number Gerald had recorded 11 times in his notebook. But according to his observations, that car had been at his gas station just 6 hours before the accident, and the timeline didn't match. Gerald called the Seattle police tip line the next morning after his shift ended. The desk sergeant seemed bored until Gerald mentioned the discrepancy in timing and location. Within an hour, Detective Ray Morrison arrived at Gerald's apartment in Ballard, a slim man in his 50s with tired eyes and coffee stains on his tie. "Tell me about these late-night customers," Morrison said, settling into Gerald's kitchen chair with a notepad of his own. Gerald walked him through 3 weeks of observations, showing timestamps, sketches of faces, and detailed descriptions of the vehicles. Morrison's expression grew more serious with each page. "You said they exchange packages?" "Sometimes. Small items, envelopes. Always quick, like they're following a script." Gerald poured coffee and sat across from the detective. The thing is, I ran those plates through the DMV database at the library. Half of them are registered to people who died years ago. Morrison stopped writing. You checked how many plates? 14 vehicles total. 7 came back to deceased owners. 3 more are registered to addresses that don't exist. I drove by to check. The rest are clean, but those cars only show up with the suspicious ones. The detective closed his notepad and studied Gerald for a long moment. Mr. Hoffman, I need you to understand something. What you're describing sounds like surveillance patterns, not random criminal activity. These people might be more dangerous than you realize. You think they're organized crime? Maybe. Or maybe something else entirely. Morrison stood and pulled a business card from his wallet. I want you to call me the next time they show up. Don't approach them. Don't change your routine. Just call. And don't mention this conversation to anyone else. After Morrison left, Gerald sat in his apartment as morning traffic built on 15th Avenue. The detective's warning carried an weight that made Gerald's previous observations seem naive. He had assumed he was watching drug dealers or car thieves, people operating on the margins of Seattle's economy. But the systematic use of false identities suggested something more sophisticated. That evening, Gerald arrived at work carrying a small camera his brother had given him the previous Christmas. If Morrison was right about the danger, Gerald wanted evidence that could be verified by others. He positioned himself differently during his shift, learning the blind spots in the station's security cameras and finding angles where he could photograph license plates without being seen. At 2:33 a.m., the blue sedan returned with 2 passengers. Gerald managed to capture 3 clear shots of the driver and one of the license plate before they drove away. When he developed the film 2 days later, he discovered something that made his hands shake. One of the passengers was wearing what appeared to be a Seattle Police Department jacket. Gerald stared at the photograph under his kitchen table lamp until his eyes burned. The jacket was definitely SPD issue. He recognized the distinctive shoulder patch from his interactions with beat cops during his Navy Shore Patrol days. But the face above it belonged to someone he'd never seen in any police context, someone who had been meeting with suspected criminals at his gas station for weeks. He called Detective Morrison's number at 6:30 a.m., 3 hours after his shift ended. Morrison answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. I need to see you right away, Gerald said. I have photographs. They met at a diner near Pike Place Market, Morrison arriving first and choosing a booth in the back corner. When Gerald slid the developed photos across the table, the detective's expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching alarm. Where did you get these? Gerald explained his decision to document the meetings, his careful positioning to avoid detection, the timing of the shots. Morrison studied each photograph with a magnifying glass he pulled from his jacket pocket, paying particular attention to faces and license plates. This man in the police jacket, Morrison said finally. You're certain he was part of the exchange? He handed something to the driver of the blue sedan. Envelope or small package, I couldn't tell which. But they knew each other, shook hands like old friends. Morrison gathered the photographs and stood abruptly. Mr. Hoffman, this situation is beyond Seattle PD's scope. I'm going to put you in contact with federal authorities, and I need you to tell them everything you've told me. Don't go to work tonight. Call in sick, take vacation, whatever it takes. Don't return to that station until you hear from me. Federal authorities. What exactly do you think is happening? I think you've stumbled into something that could get you killed if you're not careful. These aren't drug dealers or car thieves. The systematic use of deceased persons' identities, the police involvement, the careful timing. This has the signature of an intelligence operation. Gerald felt his mouth go dry. Intelligence operation? Like spies? Like spies, Morrison confirmed. And if that's what this is, your safety depends on how much they know about your observations. Have you told anyone else about this? Family, friends, co-workers? No one. You said to keep it quiet. Good. Keep it that way. Someone will contact you within 24 hours. When they do, cooperate fully, but don't volunteer information beyond what they ask. And Gerald? Morrison paused at the diner door. Start thinking about whether you can leave town for a while. If these people discover you've been watching them, your life as you know it is over. Gerald sat alone in the booth for 20 minutes after Morrison left, watching morning commuters hurry past the diner's windows. His quiet life as a night shift gas station attendant had just collided with a world he'd only read about in spy novels. The notebook in his apartment contained evidence of what might be foreign espionage on American soil, and he was the only witness who could identify the participants. Outside, Seattle continued its normal routine, unaware that one of its citizens had accidentally documented what could be the most significant counterintelligence discovery of the decade. Special Agent Sarah Chen arrived at Gerald's apartment at 7:15 p.m. the following day, accompanied by a tall man who introduced himself only as Collins and showed no identification. Chen was FBI, her credentials authentic and professional, but Collins carried himself with the careful bearing of someone from a different kind of federal agency. Mr. Hoffman, Chen began, settling onto his couch while Collins remained standing near the window. Detective Morrison has briefed us on your observations. We need to understand exactly what you've seen and how long this has been going on. Gerald walked them through his notebook page by page, describing each encounter with methodical precision. Chen took detailed notes, while Collins occasionally asked questions about timing, vehicle descriptions, and the participants' behavior. When Gerald produced the photographs, both agents studied them with an intensity that confirmed Morrison's suspicions about the seriousness of the situation. These meetings follow a pattern, Collins observed, his voice carrying a slight East Coast accent. Third Thursday of each month, alternate vehicles, always the same time window. That's operational security consistent with intelligence protocols. Intelligence protocols, Gerald asked. Chen and Collins exchanged a look that suggested they had already discussed how much to reveal. Mr. Hoffman, we believe you've identified a Soviet intelligence network that has been operating in the Pacific Northwest for at least 5 years. The people you've been photographing are likely handlers and assets engaged in espionage activities. Gerald felt the room tilt slightly. Soviet spies? In Seattle? Defense contractors, aerospace companies, naval facilities. This region is a prime target for foreign intelligence gathering, Chen explained. What you've documented could be the first solid evidence of how they've been coordinating their activities. Collins moved away from the window and sat across from Gerald. The challenge now is that you've become a security risk to their operation. If they discover you've been watching them, they'll either eliminate the threat or disappear entirely. Neither option is good for our investigation or your safety. The word eliminate hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Gerald had served his country during peacetime, had never faced enemy action or personal danger beyond the normal risks of military service. The idea that foreign agents might want to kill him for working a night shift at a gas station seemed surreal. What happens now? Gerald asked. We're going to use your access to gather more intelligence, Chen said. With your cooperation, we can document their entire network, identify their American contacts, and understand what information they're collecting. But it means you'll be working undercover for us, continuing your normal routine while wearing recording devices and following specific protocols. And if I refuse? Collins leaned forward. Then we relocate you immediately under federal witness protection, and we lose the best opportunity we've had in years to penetrate a Soviet operation. These people have been stealing military secrets, technology specifications, and classified research. Every day they operate freely is a day American national security is compromised. Gerald looked at the photographs spread across his coffee table. Faces of people he now knew were foreign agents operating in his city, using his gas station as a meeting point for activities that threatened his country. His quiet life was already over. The only question was whether it would end with him running away or fighting back. "What do you need me to do?" "Oi." The FBI technical team transformed Gerald's apartment into a staging area over the next 48 hours. They installed secure communication equipment in his bedroom closet, briefed him on surveillance detection techniques, and fitted him with recording devices so small they were virtually undetectable. Chen supervised the operation, while Collins provided context about Soviet intelligence methods that made Gerald's stomach tight with anxiety. The KGB typically runs these operations through a combination of deep-cover illegals and recruited Americans, Collins explained during one of their training sessions. The illegals are Soviet citizens living under false identities, sometimes for decades. They handle recruitment and coordinate intelligence collection. The Americans they recruit can be motivated by money, ideology, or compromise. Gerald practiced using the recording equipment until the motions became automatic, activating the device with a casual touch to his shirt pocket, positioning himself for optimal audio capture, maintaining normal behavior while documenting conversations and exchanges. The technology was sophisticated beyond anything he'd encountered in the Navy, but the basic principles were familiar. Observe, document, report. On his first night back at work, Gerald felt every muscle in his body tense when the blue sedan appeared at 2:44 a.m. The driver was alone this time, purchasing gas and a pack of cigarettes with the same nervous precision Gerald had observed before. But now, Gerald understood he was watching a trained intelligence operative, someone who had probably killed people in service to a foreign power. The recording device captured the brief exchange at the counter, the driver's careful pronunciation of English words that suggested it wasn't his native language, and background sounds that might reveal additional information about the vehicle's occupants. When Chen reviewed the audio the next morning, she pointed out subtle details Gerald had missed. "Listen to this," she said, playing back a section where the driver requested change for the cigarette machine. He's compensating for a Russian accent, but the cadence is still there. And this noise in the background, that's definitely a radio, possibly encrypted communications equipment. Collins nodded approvingly. "We're building a solid case, but we need to identify the American contacts. The person in the police jacket is our highest priority target." 3 weeks of careful documentation revealed the network's operational rhythm. Meetings occurred every 12 days, rotating between 3 different time slots and involving up to 6 participants. Gerald learned to recognize each face, to anticipate their movements, to position himself for optimal observation without arousing suspicion. The work was exhausting, requiring constant vigilance and perfect performance of his normal duties while conducting federal surveillance. But on September 15th, everything changed. Gerald was reviewing inventory sheets when he noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there when his shift started. 2 occupants sat motionless in the front seat, and one of them was pointing what appeared to be binoculars or a camera toward the gas station. They were watching him watch the spies. Gerald's cover had been compromised, and he was now the one under surveillance. Gerald's training kicked in immediately. He continued his inventory count while using the station's windows to observe the surveillance vehicle without making direct eye contact. Chen had prepared him for this possibility during their briefings, emphasizing the importance of maintaining routine behavior if he suspected detection. The watchers remained in position for 47 minutes, long enough to document Gerald's movements and interactions with customers. When they finally drove away at 3:22 a.m., Gerald activated his emergency communication protocol, sending a coded message to Chen through the device hidden in the station's coffee maker. She arrived within 30 minutes, accompanied by Collins and 2 additional agents who began sweeping the station for electronic surveillance devices. Their search revealed 3 sophisticated listening devices placed in locations that would capture conversations between Gerald and his late-night visitors: the customer service counter, the area near the gas pumps, and the employee break room. "They know," Collins said grimly, examining one of the devices under a magnifying glass. "This is KGB technology, probably installed within the last week. They've been monitoring your interactions to determine if you're law enforcement or just an observant employee." Chen pulled Gerald aside while the technical team continued their sweep. "We have to assume your cover is blown. The question is how much they know and what they're planning to do about it. Are you prepared to leave Seattle tonight?" Gerald thought about his apartment, his few possessions, the routine life he'd built after his divorce. "What about the operation? If I disappear, doesn't that confirm their suspicions?" "It also keeps you alive," Collins interjected. "These people don't take chances with potential witnesses. The fact that they're conducting surveillance instead of simply eliminating you suggests they're still evaluating the threat level." But Gerald had already made his decision during the long minutes of being watched. "What if we use their surveillance against them? If they think I'm just a curious employee who's noticed their meetings, maybe we can feed them information that makes me seem harmless while we continue gathering intelligence." Chen and Collins exchanged the same look Gerald had seen during their first meeting. "That would require you to play a very dangerous game," Chen warned. "One mistake, one inconsistency in your behavior, and they'll know we're running a counter-operation." "But it could work," Collins admitted reluctantly. "If we script your interactions carefully, make it appear you're more interested in extra money than law enforcement, we might be able to continue the surveillance while they believe they're controlling the situation." They spent the remainder of Gerald's shift developing a psychological profile that would make him valuable but non-threatening to the Soviet operation. Gerald would become a low-level asset, someone who provided information about police activity around the station, who could be bribed to ignore suspicious behavior, who posed no real threat to operational security. The plan required Gerald to initiate contact with his watchers during their next meeting, to express curiosity about their activities in a way that suggested greed rather than patriotism. Chen provided him with a script that would sound natural while conveying specific psychological cues designed to trigger recruitment protocols. "Remember," Collins said as dawn broke over Elliott Bay, "these people are professionals who have spent years perfecting their ability to manipulate Americans. The only reason this plan might work is because they're arrogant enough to believe they can turn anyone who discovers them into an asset rather than a threat." Gerald nodded, understanding that his real education in espionage was just beginning. Tomorrow night, instead of hiding his observations, he would reveal them in a carefully calculated performance designed to save his life while destroying theirs. The approach came sooner than expected. On Gerald's next shift, the blue sedan arrived 15 minutes early with 2 occupants. The driver emerged as usual, but the passenger, a woman Gerald had seen twice before, walked directly to the station's customer entrance. She was perhaps 45, professionally dressed despite the late hour, with the kind of understated appearance that made her forgettable in crowds. "Excuse me," she said to Gerald through the bulletproof glass, her accent faintly European but impossible to place precisely. "I wonder if you might help me with something." Gerald followed Chen's script, projecting mild curiosity while maintaining his normal demeanor. "Sure, what do you need?" "My friend and I have noticed that you work very regular hours. We've been coming here for several weeks now and you're always here. Very reliable, very observant." She paused, studying Gerald's reaction. "We think you might be interested in earning some additional income for your observations." "I'm not sure what you mean," The woman smiled with practiced warmth. Sometimes police patrol this area, yes? Sometimes they ask questions about late-night customers. We would be willing to pay you for advance notice of such attention. $100 for each useful warning. Gerald let appropriate greed flicker across his face while calculating his response according to Chen's psychological profile. You're talking about police? Are you in some kind of trouble? Nothing illegal, I assure you. Business matters that require privacy, meetings with clients who prefer discretion. But police attention can be inconvenient for our work. She pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on the counter. $200, as a demonstration of good faith. All we ask is that you call this number if police show unusual interest in this location or its customers. Gerald picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of cash inside, while knowing Chen and Collins were monitoring the conversation through his hidden recording device. What kind of business requires this much secrecy? Import, export, negotiations with foreign suppliers who must be careful about American regulations. Nothing that would harm anyone, but paperwork can be complicated when dealing with international partners. Her explanation was smooth, rehearsed, designed to provide plausible cover while appealing to Gerald's apparent willingness to ignore legal gray areas for money. The woman left her contact information, a phone number that Gerald knew the FBI would trace within hours, and departed, with the same careful attention to surveillance detection she had exhibited during previous visits. Gerald waited 45 minutes before signaling Chen through their emergency protocol. When she arrived for the debriefing, Chen was grim but satisfied. The number traces to a payphone in the International District, but we've got the frequency they use and the voice pattern. More importantly, they've revealed operational security procedures by approaching you directly. Collins reviewed the recording with obvious professional interest. Classic KGB recruitment technique. They've assessed you as potentially corruptible, but not sophisticated enough to represent a serious threat. The money is real. $200 in marked bills we can trace if they use them elsewhere. Gerald realized he was now officially a double agent, accepting money from Soviet intelligence while working for the FBI. His transformation from night shift gas station attendant to active participant in Cold War espionage was complete, and there would be no returning to his previous life, regardless of how the operation concluded. The intelligence flowed both ways over the following month. Gerald provided carefully crafted information about police patrol schedules, real enough to be verified, but useless for operational planning. In return, he observed an escalation in Soviet activity that revealed the true scope of their network. The meetings now included American participants Gerald had never seen before. A man in his 60s who arrived in a Mercedes and carried briefcases that changed hands quickly. A younger woman who photographed documents under the station's fluorescent lights. And most disturbing, the police officer whose jacket Gerald had originally photographed, now appearing in civilian clothes but clearly central to the operation's security. Chen and Collins assembled a comprehensive picture of the network structure from Gerald's recordings and observations. The Americans being recruited included a defense contractor working on submarine technology, a University of Washington professor with access to classified research, and at least 2 members of local law enforcement who provided information about federal investigations and surveillance operations. The damage assessment is staggering, Collins briefed Gerald during one of their safe house meetings. These people have been feeding classified information to Moscow for years. Submarine specifications, radar technology, strategic defense planning, everything the Soviets need to counter American military advantages. But the investigation's success created new dangers for Gerald. The KGB handlers had begun testing his reliability with increasingly specific requests for information about law enforcement activity. They wanted to know about FBI visits to local businesses, unusual surveillance patterns, and changes in federal security protocols around Seattle's defense installations. Gerald found himself walking a precarious line between providing believable intelligence and avoiding information that could compromise legitimate operations. Chen scripted responses that would satisfy Soviet requirements while protecting American interests, but each interaction increased the risk of exposure. The breakthrough came on October 22nd, when Gerald was asked to deliver a package instead of simply observing exchanges. The woman who had recruited him handed him a manila envelope and instructions to place it in a specific trash bin near the university district at exactly 3:30 a.m. "This is very important," she emphasized. "The timing must be precise, and you must ensure no one observes the delivery. Our business partners are very particular about security procedures." Gerald accepted the assignment, while knowing Chen and Collins would use it to identify additional network members and potentially compromise the entire operation. The package contained what appeared to be technical specifications, photocopied documents with mathematical formulas and engineering diagrams that Gerald couldn't interpret but recognized as sophisticated scientific material. FBI surveillance teams tracked Gerald to the drop site and documented the pickup by a man later identified as Dmitry Volkov, a Soviet cultural attaché with diplomatic immunity. The documents were photographed before delivery, revealing detailed specifications for a new class of American attack submarines that were still in the design phase. "This is it," Chen told Gerald after reviewing the intelligence. "We have evidence of active espionage, multiple American conspirators, and a clear chain of custody for classified documents. The operation ends tomorrow night." Gerald felt relief and terror in equal measure. After 3 months of living a double life, constantly performing a role while documenting evidence of treason, his part in the largest counterintelligence operation of his lifetime was almost over. Almost. The final meeting was scheduled for October 30th, but Gerald never made it to work that night. At 6:15 p.m., as he prepared to leave his apartment, 3 men forced their way through his front door. 2 were Americans Gerald recognized from his surveillance photographs, but the third was the blue sedan's driver, whose accent was pure Moscow when he spoke. "Mr. Gerald Hoffman," the Russian said, settling into Gerald's kitchen chair with casual authority. "We know about your extracurricular activities. We know about Agent Chen and Mr. Collins. We know about the recording devices and the safe house meetings, and the very interesting conversations you've been having with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Gerald's training deserted him completely. These were not the bumbling criminals from spy movies, easily outwitted by clever Americans. These were professionals who had spent years operating in enemy territory, who had planned for the possibility of discovery and prepared responses accordingly. "The question," the Russian continued, "is whether you understand the consequences of your cooperation with American intelligence services. Your government has promised you protection, yes? Relocation, new identity, financial support. But governments change priorities, Mr. Hoffman. Budgets are reduced, operations are declassified, witnesses become inconvenient." One of the Americans, Gerald now recognized him as the defense contractor who had been selling submarine specifications, produced a thick folder from his briefcase. "Your complete file," he said. "Home address, work schedule, ex-wife's location, family members, financial records, medical history. Information we collected over the past 2 months while your FBI handlers believed they were protecting you." The Russian opened the folder and began reading personal details that made Gerald's blood turn cold. His ex-wife's address in Portland, her new job at a medical clinic, her daughter from a previous marriage who attended Roosevelt High School, his brother in Denver who managed a sporting goods store and coached Little League baseball, his elderly parents in Spokane who lived alone in the house where Gerald had grown up. "You see the problem," the Russian said gently. "You have been very helpful to us initially. The information you provided about police patrols was accurate. The package delivery was executed properly. But then you began providing false information, carefully crafted lies designed to mislead our security assessment. Gerald forced himself to speak. What do you want? Continuation of our business relationship under revised terms. You will inform us immediately of any FBI contact or surveillance activity. You will provide genuine intelligence about law enforcement operations in this area. And most importantly, you will help us identify other American agents who may be investigating our activities. The Russian stood and walked to Gerald's window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Your government cannot protect you from us, Mr. Hoffman. We have been operating in this city since before you were born. We know every federal agent, every surveillance technique, every safe house your handlers use. He turned back to Gerald with a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. But we can protect you from them. Gerald never responded to the ultimatum. While the KGB operatives waited for his answer, FBI tactical teams surrounded his apartment building based on signals from his emergency beacon. The confrontation ended in a brief firefight that left 2 Soviet agents dead and revealed the full scope of the network's penetration into American security services. The Russian handler, whose real name was Alexei Petrov, survived to provide a detailed confession in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. His testimony revealed 15 years of successful intelligence gathering that had compromised dozens of classified programs and resulted in the deaths of at least 3 American agents operating in Eastern Europe. The submarine specifications Gerald had helped deliver were already being incorporated into Soviet naval designs. Detective Morrison, who had initiated the investigation, was found dead in his Capitol Hill apartment 3 days later. The official cause was heart attack, but Chen discovered evidence that Morrison had been feeding information to the Soviet network from the beginning. His recruitment dated back to 1978, when gambling debts made him vulnerable to KGB financial leverage. The American conspirators faced espionage charges that would result in life sentences or execution. The defense contractor, Dr. Richard Hayes, had received over $300,000 for classified submarine technology. University of Washington. Professor Linda Chen, no relation to the FBI agent, had provided research data on acoustic detection systems worth millions in military applications. 2 additional Seattle Police Department officers were arrested for providing security information and surveillance schedules. Gerald entered federal witness protection immediately after the arrests, relocating to a small town in Missouri under a new identity. The FBI provided financial support and employment assistance, but could not provide what Gerald had lost: his sense of safety, his trust in normal social interactions, his ability to live without constantly watching for surveillance. The psychological evaluation conducted 6 months later revealed symptoms consistent with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Gerald had nightmares about the Russian agent's detailed knowledge of his family. Flashbacks to the moment he realized his entire life had been researched and catalogued by foreign intelligence services. Sleep medication helped with the immediate symptoms, but couldn't address the fundamental change in how Gerald understood his relationship with the world around him. Chen visited Gerald once in Missouri, driving 6 hours to ensure the meeting couldn't be traced through official channels. They met at a diner outside Jefferson City, where she provided updates on the continuing investigation and assured him that the remaining network members had been identified and arrested. "Was it worth it?" Gerald asked, as their coffee grew cold. "Everything we went through, everything that happened to Morrison, my family having to relocate, did it actually accomplish anything?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Missouri farmland beyond the diner's windows. The submarine technology they stole was used to build 3 new Soviet attack submarines. Those submarines could have sunk American ships in a future conflict, killed hundreds of sailors. The research they obtained set back our acoustic detection capabilities by at least 5 years. So yes, it was worth it. Gerald nodded. understanding intellectually that his sacrifice had served national security interests. But sitting in a Missouri diner, living under a false name, and dependent on federal protection for the rest of his life, he wondered if ordinary citizens could ever truly comprehend the price of victory in the shadow war between superpowers. Outside, America continued its daily routine, unaware that a gas station attendant had helped prevent Soviet intelligence from stealing the technology that might have determined the outcome of the next war.